following podcast contains spoilers, adult language, carrier pigeons in French, chance meetings in French, a song by The Doors in French, a drag queen in French, and an awkward run-in with an ex you abandoned by the roadside, not in French.
This is a message from the Office of Emergency Preparedness. Due to the recent crisis, we ask that you remain in your homes. Do not attempt to communicate or interact with the creatures, even if they are people you know.
Lock your doors. Bar your windows. The dead are coming. It's time for Aim for the Head, an all Walking Dead universe podcast. And now, here are your hosts, Diana and Steve.
Hi, and welcome back to Aim for the Head podcast. I'm Diana.
And I'm Steve.
And this is podcast episode number 300. Woo, woo, woo!
Thank you.
I was trying to I'll have to cut in, that stupid basketball thing there, beer, 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 or whatever. Maybe I can cut that in and annoy people who listen to this with their ears, and I'll put a noise that'll make people punch something.
You could really skip that, because I think that our voices annoy them enough that we don't need to add.
What do you mean? People love us. We get downloads, Steve. Anyway, folks, thanks for tuning in this week. This week we're going to be discussing episode 3 of Daryl Dixon. And title of the episode, Paris Sera, Toujours Paris, which means Paris will always be Paris. And this is our 300th episode. Insert annoying noise here. And we are going to celebrate that. We've got some fun facts and notes and figures and some feedback we got from some folks about it being our 300th episode, and some stuff to sort of look back on. But we're going to talk about that in the second half, which is usually technically our shorter part of the episode. We didn't want to add to our already usually longer portion of the episode. So stick around for the second half if you don't usually listen in, because that's usually when we just do the feedback and what's coming up next. Stick around for part 2, when we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the history of us and some cool facts and figures, because who doesn't love facts and figures? I even use this sheet, so that's like, we're at peak nerd here, folks. You're welcome. But anyway, we'll get to that in the second half, as I discussed. Now we're going to jump into talking about episode 3. I went first last week, so Steve, it's your turn to go first. Let's talk quick thoughts. What did you think of episode 3 of Daryl?
Actually, I think I went first last time, and you go
what?
First. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure.
Didn't update the paperwork, so let's do that now. We just chatted a little bit before we went live, and I told Steve I think I liked this episode a little bit better than last week. I think that they are still working out some of their growing pains. Their growing pains are using derivative storylines, doing things with their main character that he wouldn't normally do this far into the apocalypse because he's a smart person. And just generally speaking, some plot points that you're like, hello, coincidence. So those are problematic, and they're still there, but I was just explaining to Steve, I don't know why, and I think it's location-based. I am more entertained by the Daryl Dixon show than I was by Dead City, I think. And don't get me wrong, I was entertained. How can Negan not entertain people? But you also sort of know what you're going to get. This is sort of like a question mark as well. So it's a little surprising. And yes, there are some plot points and some things that are like, that feel kind of like a retread. But the location and the area is just so foreign. And because we know that it was filmed in France, there's something about it that draws me in. So that being said, I'm highly entertained by this series. I was entertained by this episode. I was really drawn in. There are definitely some moments, which we will, of course, talk about when we get into our points, that made me pause. And as CNC Music Factory said, they were things that made you go, and we'll get there. But overall, I really like this episode. I'm curious sort of to see, too, like where we're leading to. And we already know that they're renewed for a second season, so I'm not sure like what the next chunk of time will involve with Daryl Dixon. But for the time being, I'm enjoying more of the episode than I am not, and I'm overall entertained. So far so good. So how about you? What were your thoughts on episode 3?
I think pretty similar to what you just said there. I'm enjoying the series. It's certainly not anything groundbreaking in terms of the story they're telling.
Right.
I mean, not just the obvious comparisons to Last of Us, but I mean, just in general, there's been nothing they've really done here where you're like, oh, I've never seen that before. I mean, I guess the closest would be the Killer Nuns, maybe, but everything else is just kind of your formulaic. Oh, okay, and here's the big evil bad guys that are super well equipped and have, running cars and boats and, all that stuff. And here's, kind of our ragtag, friendly group that, are living on a rooftop somewhere, and all this. So again, it's not stuff we haven't seen before. It's all just kind of derivative of other things we've done, but it is very well made. And I'm enjoying it. I kind of was hoping we wouldn't have as many of the Daryl being on Daryl moments that we're having. But I'm again, it's the people who are telling their story. This is the way that they decided to do it, and just Daryl, I guess, is just so freaked out that he's in France that he has just forgot everything that happened in America and how to deal with walkers, because he ain't doing none of it now.
Right.
But yeah, other than that, again, I thought it was pretty good. I thought, the acting is great. I still can't stand the kid. I don't care if he is the Messiah. He's annoying. And I like Isabel, and I like the other nun. So, I mean, I think that there's some really good casting going on for the most part. But we'll have to see how far in the story they're going to get now that they know there's a season 2, right? Is it? Yeah. I mean, are we going to get to... Did they know that before they finished, or are we going to get to the end of episode 6 and you could see where it's like, oh, if they were never to do another episode, it could end this way? Or did they all along, were they like, nope, this is just, the placeholder for, episode 7, which is coming, in 2 years or whatever.
Right.
So overall, yeah, I'm enjoying it. I don't know if I would say it's better than Dead City, like you said. I think right now for me, it's kind of about the same so far. But again, we still got 3 episodes to go, so that could obviously change either way.
True. This is true. Okay. All right. Well, before we get into our details about the episode, let's remind ourselves what the circumstances of the episode were to be. So let's go into the episode description for episode 3. Steve, take it away.
All right. Well, this is, again, episode 1.3 of The Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon. And the episode is entitled Paris, Sera, Toujours, Paris, which, as we said, probably means Paris will always be Paris. And the description that we have is... The group arrives in Paris, where Isabel confronts her past while growing closer to Daryl. Caudron seeks help from the leader of a growing nationalist movement called Pouvoir, putting the Union of Hope and Laurent under dangerous scrutiny. And that is your episode description. And that was actually pretty verbose for their episode descriptions, I thought.
Yeah, because I got it from someplace else. That was the not truth an is out. One. The truth is out. I cannot be stopped. Oh God, the terrible French accents. I'm so sorry, people. So let's talk writer director before I get into our points. Looks like we've had a little bit of a change up in the writer-director areas.
We do. We have a new pair this week, which is kind of interesting. The writer is a gal named Colleen Albert, Abert, and she is also listed as a producer on the show. So not surprising that they're kind of giving a lot of the producer, exec type folks a chance to write the story. So I'm guessing she was part of the original gang that came up with this idea. But this is her first credit writing for The Walking Dead. And as far as I could tell, this is her first credit in anything. So I'm not saying that she didn't do other stuff. She probably has. It's just I couldn't find anything on IMDb or the Walking Dead wiki or some of the usual places I look for these people to try and find out what else they've done.
Right.
So I don't know. And it's, with her name, her first name is spelled Coline, which is obviously an unusual spelling for Colleen. It looks French to me. So maybe it's possible she was or is a French woman, and they found her in France. Obviously, when they were setting the show here or something, they brought her in because of her familiarity with I don't know. So it could be she has lots of credits in French television as well that we just aren't translating over here. But in any case, she wrote this episode. And this is the only one that she has written so far, and she is not involved in any of the other 3 episodes coming up as a writer. So this is her only credit. So, and then our director is a guy named Tim Southam, and he this is his first Walking Dead credit. But he is also directing next week's episode 4, which I believe is titled La Dame de Fer. And so that we'll get to see him again. And if you remember when we first started, the first 2 episodes were directed by the same guy. I think his name was Percival, his last name was. And so they're kind of keeping that system intact again, in that the episodes 3 and 4 are directed by the same guy, and probably episodes 5 and 6 will be directed by the same person as well. And I think it's just to kind of make the vision similar, for the 2 episodes, so we don't have different, directors coming in and I want to do it this way. Well, I'm doing it that way, and then it just doesn't have that kind of uniform look to it. So,
right.
But this, like I said, this episode 3 is his first Walking Dead credit that he's been involved with, but he has directed a bunch of other television as well. He's directed episodes of American Gods, of Lock and Key, the reboot of Lost in Space, The Bates Motel. He did episodes of like Bones from going back a little bit, as well as a show called Colony, if you ever watched that show. So a lot of stuff. So he's a very, very established director. And, for both of them, the writer and the director, other than kind of some of the stuff we'll get into with Daryl being on Daryl, and there's like 1 or 2 things in here where I was majorly rolling my eyes at, but for the most part, I thought it was a good episode, and it moved well, and it kept my attention. So I don't think they were bad. I think they did a pretty good job with it. What was your thoughts on the writing and the directing?
I think I didn't feel like there was any like big shift between like the first 2 episodes and here. I don't know. I'm wondering too if it's just like this, sometimes they pick writers based on like what sort of specialty they can write to, as well as directors. So, perhaps there was something in this episode that made it, a better fit for these 2 to work together, as opposed to in like the first 2 or the last 2 or what have you. So, but yeah, I thought everything felt seamless from like episode 2 to episode 3. So I didn't feel like, let's put it this way, I feel like the overall theme, the overall feeling of the episode, the overall sort of design and look and feel of everything was seamless from one to the next. So I don't if you had told me it was a different writer and director, I'm not sure I would have known that.
Okay.
At least not to me. The only time I can sort of sense it is like, I feel like they're giving Laurent like some of the most stupid things to say to sort of highlight that he is precocious and
annoying
immature, and also has no like sort of street sense / common sense. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So to show sort of his innocence. So, I don't know. Like that's the only difference I could sort of tell, was that a lot of his dialogue felt very kind of this week. But other than that, I thought the writing and direction was good this week.
Okay, well that's fair.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. How about you? Were you a fan of the writing and the directing this week?
Like I said, it was fine. It kept me entertained. I just think that there's a couple moments in there where I was, like I said, massively rolling my eyes, like really, which we'll get into. But again, it's it is what it is. I mean, it's extremely well made. It's got that kind of Walking Dead look about it, that it looks great. And regardless of what the narrative is, regardless of how bad the lines are or what the story is, it looks fantastic, because the Walking Dead technical folks are really good at what they do, and so that's a constant. So I mean, and like I said, I for the most part have been entertained. It's just there have been some things that I wouldn't have personally wanted to see in the zombie apocalypse that apparently are just staples now, but that's just the way it is. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump in then. And if I can get everybody to sort of, if you can stretch, and are you ready to go? Okay. So 5, 6, 7, 8, zombie orchestra, go.
To Bolero, no less.
Right. Exactly. So.
Yeah. Do you like
another thing we haven't
Ravel?
seen. I thought of that when you were talking at the beginning, and you were like, well, Killer Nuns is something we haven't seen before. We haven't really seen a zombie orchestra before. Not really.
No, I can't. I mean, it's sort of like, to me, it was just a take off on, or an expansion of what Princess did in her city, sort of the tableau kind of setup of, the ghouls are like literally stapled in place with, hats on their heads and stuff. And here it's like, no, they're just attached to their instruments. So when they move, they kind of make it. So, I mean, again, have we seen this exact thing done? No, but we've seen something like it already. In the Walking Dead universe, even. So, but again, like I said, it was fun, and I loved the crazy of it. That Daryl wants to just go straight to Paris, and Izzy is like, no, we can stop at this place because this guy here that we know has a radio, and he can radio ahead to the people that we're going to meet, so they know we're coming, that kind of thing. And when they get there, that guy in the year since the end has just gone completely batshit crazy, right? Yeah. And to the point where he is like basically taking apart the radio to make the sound system work so he can go conduct his zombie orchestra. I mean, I loved that. I thought that was a fun little touch of, yeah, you know what, this person completely by themselves in this type of a world, yeah, they lose it, and this is what makes sense to them. So that was fun. It just wasn't something like, I've never seen that before. So that it was cool.
I like that the interesting take that Paris and France in general, this whole series is very concerned with maintaining the art of the time before. So it's definitely something they are stressing. And in some ways it's, saving saving a beautiful Monet painting is one thing and putting it up on the wall, but leading a bunch of zombies in a reimagining of Ravel's Bolero is totally different. Or is it? In his mind it's not. He's doing the same thing as saving a Monet and keeping it on the wall somewhere where no one can harm it. He feels like he's doing the same thing. So as much as we see him as crazy on the inside, he's like, it's art. We're saving the art. We're keeping the culture. Art going. It's culture. Yes.
That's what he kept saying. See, culture lives. It lives.
Yeah. Even if you're using the dead to make it live, which is interesting. I'm with you too. I thought it was creepy. I thought it was crazy. I loved the tension, like that feeling between Daryl and Isabel when Daryl just wants to be like, are you fucking kidding me right now?
Yeah.
It was a very like the same feeling when everybody walked into the auditorium and met Ezekiel for the first time. Mm-hmm. And they're like, I don't know what I'm looking at. And I'm totally like at a loss for words, and I'd like to leave now. May we leave?
Yes, we should be going now.
Yeah, let's post haste. And so they do. So yeah. So that was that for the guy that took apart his radio because he's dumb because he wants to make sure culture lives. That's it lives.
Right. See, you see, they play.
All right. So you made a point of talking about I did I put it in my notes? No. But when they come out of the the auditorium, the theater where this guy is located, because he actually has them up on a stage and in like an actual theater space, the zombie orchestra. When they exit that building and come out, the noise and the sound of what had been happening in the building had actually drawn a ghoul over to where Sylvie and Laurent was waiting outside. And Sylvie is all like aiming and getting ready to fire, but is hesitating. And I would assume she's waiting until the very last second because she doesn't want to draw more because she's smart. That's how I interpreted the scene. And then Isabel and Daryl come out. Daryl takes the gun from her, the musket, I'm sorry. Not even really like a gun. And he just shoots right away. And you made a point of talking about it. And I'm the same way as you. Why are we not using Mike, at least use the butt of the gun?
Right. It's again, it's a case of Daryl knows better that first of all, bullets are precious in this, in this world, unless you're the big bad guys, because they had, the AK-47s and the bandoliers of ammunition, unlimited supply. But for the rest of the people, bullets are very, very hard to come by. And he just knows that, look, as soon as you pull that trigger, all you're going to do is you're going to attract every ghoul within like a mile is going to be walking towards you now.
Exactly.
And since you're in this big city, you don't know, is it going to be like a Rick Grimes thing where, you come around the corner and there's literally like 500 ghouls out in the street? Yeah. Right? If you remember when he was clippity-cloppeting down the streets of Atlanta there in episode 2. So, I mean, it just, you would think that Daryl would come out, see that Sylvie's getting ready to shoot that ghoul, and then take the gun from her. And then, he's got that big trench knife that he took from the convent and just, kill the ghoul the way he kills every other ghoul we've ever seen him kill, pretty much, and just silently, bang, it's down. And then, they get in the thing and they go away. And we see what happens. He shoots the ghoul. And then like 20 of them come around the corner and are coming after him. So now, and granted, they got in their little wagon and was able to ride away. But it's like, but they're going to be behind you now.
Yeah.
So
and until something distracts them, they're going to follow you in that direction. That's the thing. Is right. They're like the, they're they're like a perpetual motion thing. Mm-hmm. They move in infinite direction until they are moved off course. Now, odds are they'll get moved off course by something. A bird will chirp, something will make a noise, and it'll distract them and they'll stop following them. So the odds are that they're not going to like follow them all the way to Paris. But if you don't know the area you're in, if it's, it's such a risk. It's right. Such a risk. When he stepped out the door, they outnumbered the ghouls because they only had one and there was 4 of them. Mm-hmm. As soon as he shot the gun, it immediately, they were outnumbered 2-1.
At least.
Easy. And that's just the stuff we saw before they drove away. And it's like, and you're right, it is. It's very un-Daryl-like behavior. It's just not something that someone who is, as experienced as he is would do at all.
So, someone who's survived this long, out there, doing what we've seen him do. He would know that's just, it's foolish on many levels. And yet he just does it, and again, it's a cool effect. You get to see the ghoul get its brains blown out and all that. Okay, that's fun, but it's like, okay. So that was a little problematic for me, where I was just like, I don't think he would do that.
Yeah, I noticed that right off the bat too. I was like, I honestly thought that that's what they were crafting the scene around, was Sylvie's inexperience because she's younger, and yes, they were trained to be, quote unquote killer nuns, but have they had to employ that? How often do they have to actually even kill a ghoul? They're inside a walled nunnery. It's probably not something that had to do very, very often. Yes, she's very well trained and she can handle herself without question. But in that moment, the aiming and the shooting is her inexperience. And I thought that's how they were crafting that scene, was Daryl come out and go, no. You never want to do that. It's going to echo off all these buildings. And if you just do this, and we can go. Yeah. And whatever other, walkers are here, they won't be the wiser. But it's not what they did. And you're right. It's disappointing overall that they do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And speaking of disappointing, let's talk about coincidences.
Yes, because they have a lot of coincidences.
And I only listed a couple, but they sort of grow with each other as
they do.
Anyway, so they leave that location and they're like, I love how the end of like the cold open was Daryl just going, "We're going to Paris." Yeah. And I'm like, okay. Mm-hmm. It sounded so like, I don't know. I can't describe it. There's just this moment of like, I can see Norman Reedus at a read through with a script in front of him going, "We're going to Paris." And everyone going, "Woo!" and clapping like, "We're going to Paris." Anyway, sorry.
It's so funny because it's almost like a reading from like the Beverly Hillbillies or something, where it's like, "Woo, doggy, we're going to Paris." You know what I mean? It's
going to Gay Perry.
Yeah.
So he makes that pronouncement. We do the credits, and then we come back, and they are, making their way into like the outskirts of Paris, their Paris proper, as it were. And I gotta say, for coincidences, they just happen to be walking by the most famous cemetery known to man, the Père Lachaise, where, Laurent is like, "Oh, Molière is..."
They don't just walk by it, they walk through it.
Yeah, no kidding. Molière is buried here, and so is blah, blah, blah. And in my head, I was like, isn't that the one that Jim Morrison is?
Yeah,
and then the song comes on, and I'm like, there's no way. They can't. Yeah. And then he's like, Jim Morrison. I'm like, son of a bitch. Why?
Hey, it's the travel log for Paris for that episode. So they
Clearly,
because we had to see the Eiffel Tower, we had to see the famous cemetery, right? So we're getting like some of the big landmarks from Paris. I'm surprised they didn't go underneath the Arc de Triomphe and
that's next week. That's
they didn't go past the Louvre,
but they did see a famous painting.
They did see a famous painting, yes.
They did. And so they can only do the top 3 TripAdvisor things to do. Next week they will delve into the bottom half of like the top 5 or 6. So
they did go to the catacombs.
They did go to the catacombs. Jeez. All right. So so they just happen to be walking through that cemetery. Son of a bee. And also they're there in the cemetery and, immediately they come across some people, some humans, and they just happen to be the first people they run into happen to be part of the group they're looking for. What? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. I like that coincidence, and there were just coincidences on top of coincidences here, but that one I just kind of chalk up to, we got 6 episodes, people. We got to tell our story.
Right. I get it. And did they do similar things with Dead City? Absolutely. Like,
sure.
We're going to find the exact person we need to find for, XYZ that's going to happen in the next episode. And I get it. Like you're saying, if they had like a 16 episode arc of a season, could they spend more time and sort of luxuriate in Paris before they actually find the group they're supposed to find? Sure, absolutely. But God, I hate that stuff. We're like, immediately they're like, oh, we know who you are. We've been looking for you. I'm like, ugh, have you been though? There's no other people. There's no other groups. It has to be. I mean,
there is, because we go to the nightclub and it's populated with half the cast from the Road Warrior. So it's like, clearly there's lots of people still alive in Paris. But
hey, now,
you're right.
It was a mixture of Road Warrior and the bar from Total Recall.
I didn't see the girl with the 3 boobs though.
She comes next week.
Okay.
She'll be there, and she's the Toxic Avenger, lady.
Gotcha.
Anyway, sorry.
Daryl,
we digress, people.
Start the reactor.
2 weeks.
That's right. 2 weeks.
I know. I can't ever take the phrase 2 weeks seriously for the rest of my life. Sorry. Get ready for a surprise.
It's a Jolly Time cab.
Yeah, sorry. I will say this. So there were some coincidences, but here's the thing. For good stuff, I really liked that cover of People Are Strange. I thought that was really, really cool. I think I would have liked it more if we didn't have an absolutely ridiculous coincidence of running into the cemetery, to the gravesite of Jim Morrison. Because here's the thing. I knew as soon as they were like, oh, it's the burying place of Moliere and whatever. I was like, I think Jim Morrison's buried there too. And they were playing the music and I was like, yeah, he is buried there. I was trying to remember because I had a poster when I was in college, and it was it's the picture of his, because there's a bust of him at his cemetery plot. And it's all been graffitied over the years. Even though it's graffitied, it's beautiful. It's just so cool. But they didn't. I was like, are they going to play the song? Are they going to play the song and show the gravesite? Because that would be crazy. And they did. They showed the gravesite. But regardless of that, I thought the cover was great. It's a really, really great cover of People Are Strange. And yes, it was crazy that they ran into those people, but I really like Falou, who was sort of their leader. I thought he was really friendly, and I gotta say, regardless of our CRM style, army group of people, Daryl's run into mostly nice people so far. Yes, I mean, there was the girl Maribel and the grandfather or whatever that, knocked over the head.
The grifters.
Yeah, the grifters. But they were ultimately, like, they didn't kill him. They just knocked him over the head because they wanted to steal his stuff.
Right.
They were so, like, lowball.
So they were like mostly bad.
Yeah,
mostly.
They weren't, like, super evil or anything. They were just trying to survive. Mm-hmm. And they were doing what they could, and they had a con that worked. Big deal. But, running into Isabel's group, ultimately nice people. The group of children, ultimately a nice group of people. And in this instance, the same thing. A nice group of people. And I thought Falou was very friendly, and he was very honest about a lot of stuff, and he was very straightforward about a lot of things with no bullshit. As soon as it was clear, like, like the whole carrier pigeon thing, he thought we had a different form of communication. He's like, we're going to make this right. We're going to do this. You deserve this. You brought him here, and I just thought, like, the way that actor was playing that role, I really like his take on it. He's engaging and honest and interesting. I'm not sure we're going to learn any more about him, is unfortunate. I think because we only get the 6 episodes, it's not like they're going to be able to delve into this dude's backstory. But I like him so far. I think he's it gets so tiresome, like Dead City, like we were saying, like you get that formula of, the bad people that take your stuff, or the bad people that want something you have. And we do have that here. We do have a bad group of people that just want Daryl back, et cetera, et cetera. But the good people so far have outweighed the bad people. And I just think that that's interesting, because that's a very different way of telling a Walking Dead story. Usually it's the other way around. Usually, I mean, dude, fight the dead but fear the living, is their whole motto.
That's what we said last week. It's been ingrained in us as fans of the Walking Dead universe that, anybody you come upon on the road, they've got, the heads in the fish tank somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And especially the ones that appear nice to begin with, you have to fear those even more.
Right.
I mean, it's never a case of, oh no, this person's good. It's like, if they start out nice, they're going to be really crazy, or they're just going to be crazy from the get-go, like with the Whisperers or like the Wolf guys or whatever. But, everybody else, that there's like, no, we're friends. Yeah, you're going to kill me and eat me, Mr. Terminus guy. So of course that's our reaction whenever we meet anyone. Whenever the characters on our show meet new people, there's always that, well, okay, when is the crazy going to come out?
Yes.
And it's not a question of if, it's just when.
Just when. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're right. They've definitely gone against that formula a lot on this show, in that the majority of the groups that we've met have started out nice and ended up staying nice. At least, we never saw the crazy with the kids, right? Right. Was it there? Maybe, but we never saw it. There was never that, coming into the basement and, oh, here's all the parents that are all zombified that are roaming around that they're keeping it. I mean, we didn't get any of that stuff. So, and so far here, we've seen examples of the crazy, but it's been like the guy with the orchestra. Mm-hmm. Where you're like, okay, that's obviously that he's lost it, right? And I guess you could say maybe with the convent, the fact that they have the priest still alive in the closet, that might be a sign of, maybe they're starting to crack, because they clearly, like, we don't know what to do with him. Do we kill him because he's a priest? Does that mean we're going to, they could be struggling with a lot of issues of like, how do we deal with this? And it just ended up, well, we'll just keep him locked up in the closet for now. And that just is the way it is. But still, overall, it's been a lot of extremely friendly, nice people, and very few, I'm going to kill you and take all your stuff. And so we'll have to see with the 3 episodes we got left, what are we gonna? Is it gonna be more of the bad guys we're gonna run into, or is it gonna be more of the people that are there that maybe aren't gonna be your friend, but they're just gonna be neutral? We'll have to see.
Yeah. Yeah. I really liked their location. I thought that this whole, calling it the nest makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
They're at the top of a building. They're like on a roof. They've built up on top of, and it
like Strand.
Yeah. And it's very, I know, but I like that it's, I like the look and feel of the whole, like the scaffolding is different. It gives people like a sense of like having their own space. And I loved that they were up above. I've had like nightmares before that I'm in the apocalypse, and in my head I'm always like, well, I'm not a great fighter, so anything that I did where I lived somewhere, in my head my plan is to be on a rooftop somewhere, because the only way you can be away from people and the ghouls at the same time. And so like when I have that nightmare, I sort of like have my whole like the things I would do and whatever. And it's all always been centered around like being on a rooftop somewhere. So for me personally, it's just interesting to see it play out in, unlike Strand, where it's like, he's a dictator. This is like a community, and they're working together. And I hope we see some more of it next week to get some more details. But I thought it was cool, and their location gives them this great view of what's left of the Eiffel Tower. And it's funny because when they said like it makes noises like it cries, this is interesting, but like right at the front of my property, we have a big cell phone tower. And up at the top, obviously there's all the, the pieces that, the cell phone, signals emit from, all the 5G going right into my brain, obviously. But the way it's sort of crafted is we can always tell when it's a really windy day, and if there's like high winds, like almost damaging winds, because the top of the cell phone tower will whistle when the wind goes through it. So when they were saying that, like the way when the wind goes through the Eiffel Tower, and they called it that it was like that it's crying, some of that is that because it's falling apart as well. So they're getting like the mash of the metal and creaking and stuff like that, which isn't happening in my case, but like it felt similar. And I guarantee you when that happens, again, whenever we have some sort of high wind event, I will, of course, if I hear it, just be like, oh, it's like the Eiffel Tower crying or whatever. So that's just my own personal thing. But I enjoyed that they had like the view, and it didn't feel like they did it just to do it. Because here's the thing, it's a really big monument. So they could have been in all kinds of locations that had that as a view. It's not like they did it for the show just to be like, oh, and look, the Eiffel Tower is right there. I think it'd be difficult to have something on a rooftop somewhere and not have a view of the Eiffel Tower, is what I mean. So It would be there regardless. So it didn't feel forced to me. I thought it was cool. Yeah. All right. What did you, and obviously we're up in the nest. We meet their radio person. You made a point too. I love the carrier pigeons. It's such a cute idea.
It's practical, Yeah. I mean, a lot of what they've set up for the world in France here, I've really enjoyed, because it's almost a sense of they've realized they're no longer in an electric society anymore.
Yes.
With electricity and power. And so they've had to adapt and go back to technologies that they can do that don't require it. And so, you see like we were talking about with the weapons that they have. And part of it, too, is because, France isn't like the U.S. and, where guns are just prolific and everybody has 20 of them. It's much much more restricted, and most of the, I think Lisa Dupree mentioned this, most of the guns that people have in France are collectibles, so they're going to be ancient, older weapons. But there's a practical aspect of that too, which is, you can still melt down lead, with a regular fire and make lead, musket balls, and you can still make gunpowder with the proper, ingredients, and make your own, shot and shell, and produce guns that work, but they're not going to be modern weapons. They're going to be these kind of, 18th, 19th century guns. And so I really like that. And I like the idea here that, if they don't have a radio that works, but they do have a way to communicate with people in other parts of the city or parts of the country, where they throw the pigeon up and it just does what carrier pigeons do. This is something that they used in times of war. They've used carrier pigeons before, so this is not something that like they thought of for the first time. They're just going back to a technology, or in this case, using an animal to pass their messages, because that's what's available to them. So I really like that. I thought that was fun. And I also love the fact that, Daryl's like, well, how long does this take? And they're like, a couple of days. And then the guy's like, yeah, if it's bad weather, it might be then he says something, and Daryl looks over at Izzy and she's like, could take a month. And he's like, yeah, that ain't going to work for me.
And as soon as they were talking about it, I was like, the carrier pigeon seems like a great idea for like local, I want to send a message to another part of France, or maybe people that are right over the border in the very next country or something,
or just even, hey, I want to send a message, to those people that are like 10 blocks away.
Yes.
What I mean? That we have like a small, safe house set up that's, maybe it's like a 20-minute walk, but there's so many ghouls between here and there. We don't like to go out because it's not safe. So instead, it's kind of like with Dead City, where, they had the cable lines between the buildings. It's like you use those because it's just not safe to go down onto the ground, like you had just said with your, what you would do in the end, where you'd be living up top somewhere where you're saying, well, same thing here.
Right.
It's much safer and easier for us to throw up a carrier pigeon and let it fly the 10 blocks and have them write their answer and send it back than for us to mount up the people and resources to try and fight our way across the streets to get there to talk to them. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So I really liked it. And I thought that would just kind of fell right in line with a lot of the low tech stuff that we've seen in this country, in France. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. That is something that I have been enjoying as well. Like when we've been talking about like things we enjoy, don't enjoy about the world they've created here. And yeah, I had forgotten about that. The low techness of it, like the embracing of some of the low tech stuff and making it feel very sort of natural, and it's true. Carrier pigeons are something that's been done before, using those, the muskets and the arms, you have to make like homegrown like bullets and stuff like that. Yeah. That's the way it was back then. So like, yes, exactly. I agree with you. And I think the carrier pigeon thing too is a really great way to sort of show that they are learning from history, what worked before. And we've got to try and do that again to have our world be a regular society again, or a new type of society.
Well, and remember that Fallow is, very, very confident that they're going to survive the ZA, right? He points out, I think it's when they're going through the catacombs, he mentions to Daryl that the people, like a large chunk of the bones that are there are people that died during the Black Plague. Yes. And then he says, America is just a newborn. And Europe has been around, and he's like, we've already survived multiple apocalypses, and then
Yeah.
so we're gonna survive this one too. And he's super confident about it. And I kind of had Daryl's reality in my head of like, really, you think so? You think we're gonna survive? Because like your little group is you're so excited, you got up to 64 people. That's how many people you have living in your little group. And
Yeah.
what was the population of Paris before the fall?
Yeah.
3, 4, 5 million people. And how many people think live there now? 1,000. I mean, it's like, come on. I mean, humanity is on the verge of extinction right now if you look at the numbers in this universe. So, but no, he's like, no, we're gonna beat it. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Hey, you got to give him points for positivity,
Well, and he's a believer, and he believes that the annoying one, which is what I'm referring to Laurent now, he's the one that's gonna have either cure infection or stop infection or annoy the dead to where they leave everybody alone. I don't know, something's gonna happen with him. And that's going to be their ticket to going back to the way things were before. So, and that faith is what makes him so positive. So,
yeah. And speaking of faith, faith of a different kind, I would say, we get this great scene of our favorite tattooed gentleman, Caudron. And he has come to meet with the leader of this Pouvoir group.
Pover.
And Pover. That's how us Americans are going to say it.
But I'm an American.
Yeah. And it's the woman we've seen before. Her name is Jeanette. Jeanette, and he basically goes there to offer his services. He knows that she is looking for I'm using air quotes here, the American, and he thinks that he can deliver the American, and and she wants to know why, and so we get a little bit of background on who Caudron is, and and how he sort of came to be like a believer. And he was actually tattooed by one of the folks of their group, which is interesting.
On the face, no less.
Yeah, like, could we put it someplace else, please? But he basically is saying, he made a promise to look after his brother, and he doesn't want the American to make a liar out of him. Because clearly Daryl killed the brother during the fight, and
yes, but remember, it was not Daryl; it was Maribel that killed him. So
Daryl was just there.
Daryl was fighting him, and I think Daryl might have stabbed him once, but she's the one that ran him through with the spear.
She sure did. So, but Daryl was there. He's getting all the blame.
Well, that's because that's what she ratted him out.
She did.
So they're like, no, this American, he killed those guys. We were just standing there. We couldn't do anything.
We're innocent.
So, yeah. Oh yeah. Yes. I mean, they were doing what they've been doing, which is lie, and more damn lies to save themselves, which I totally get.
I would do the same thing. So Daryl's going to take the fall, and because this guy has some revenge in his heart, and it's strong, because you could see like he was tearing up a little bit when he's making his case to Jeanette, and she says, "You're hired. We'll take you." I mean, and for her feeling, she, here she's got someone who's a true believer in their cause, who wants to help out. Why not? She wants to find this American. Maybe her resources are stretched thin, trying to do multiple things and also look for this guy. And here's this guy volunteering to go do it and bring him to her. Absolutely, do it. What's the worst that can happen? He fails. They haven't been able to find him so far, so she'd be in the exact same position as where she was. But the interesting part isn't his pitch and her agreeing, it's pretty obvious that was going to happen. But the interesting part is when he's on his way in, he walks past, there's like a scientific room, like a research area, and they're doing something with a ghoul in there, but they just sort of pause there for a hot second so you can see that they're doing something. When he's finished talking to her, she's like, "Come with me." And they go there and go into this, lab facility, this sort of medical facility or research facility they're doing. And there's a ghoul there, and it is chained to the wall on either side. Like each arm and whatever is chained off. Mm-hmm. And it's like sort of, I guess you could call it was kind of like sort of spasming. Like it was doing its usual thing, but it was also like starting to get like herky-jerky in a way. And then it pulls the chain out of the wall, which is hello superhuman strength. Yeah. And then it is all of a sudden like the head starts to like shake a little, and it comes up to the glass, which separates the lab area from where the ghoul is, which is smart. And the ghoul comes up right by the glass and shakes his head a little bit more, almost like he's sort of, having a malfunction, as it were. And there's kind of like, it looks like there's sort of some kind of soft explosion in the head, because he's just there, and then all of a sudden, poof, there's a little blood, and then he's done and sinks down to the ground. And that was the little, and there's a doctor there, and he's got a clipboard, and he's keeping track and observing this whole thing. And on the stopwatch, he says 11 seconds.
18, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, 18 seconds. So we have to assume that they've done something to the ghoul, whatever it is that they did. They ran it, and it lasted 18 seconds. And to me, and I wondered what your thoughts were, it felt like they had done something to the brain itself. Like they put some kind of electrode or some type of device. Because to me, like that's what I attributed to sort of the head, like sort of jerking and shaking. What did you think of that scene? Like, what did you think of that experiment?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily go with they implanted something. The fact that we've seen the ghouls that got acid for blood, they're the xenomorph ghouls. I was more on the lines of that kind of experimentation, like they injected something into the ghouls' bloodstream.
Oh yeah. I didn't even think of that.
Then they kind of backed away, and they watched the process, and that's when they injected enough of it or however amount for the experiment, and then he started his stopwatch, and they observed what happened, and it lasted 18 seconds before it eventually burned its way out or popped out of its head or whatever. But again, we don't really know. There's not enough info yet, so it could be anything, right? I mean, it could absolutely be that they're performing some kind of surgery on them and to try and control them or whatever. But my first thought was they're trying to weaponize the ghouls, and so they're and they're not scary enough or dangerous enough just being flesh-eating zombies that we're going to make them that they're have the acid coming out of them, so that even if you just get close to them, you could still be hurt or killed because of the stuff that they give off or whatever. So, but again, like I said, we got to see more. I mean, we don't really know. All we know is that they're doing something. Yeah.
All I was going to say is to me, it felt like it's just a teaser scene anyway.
Yeah.
They're confirming. I mean, you already knew based on her reaction to the ship in the first episode, that they were doing experiments. We just didn't know what kind.
Yeah.
Like what exactly. But now we know they're doing some kind of, I mean, I guess you could call it interference with the ghouls themselves, and they just gave us sort of like a little slice of it, just like a little taste of it.
Yeah, it was very reminiscent to me of World Beyond.
Same.
Where they were doing something right, where they were letting people get bit and freezing them or whatever it was they were doing, but we never really found out what they were trying to do. They just were conducting their experiments, and I agree with you. I think it's most likely going to be tabled for this season just because they've got 3 episodes to tell the rest of their story here. And they'll come back to it next season, right? I mean, maybe we'll get a little bit more, a little taste, particularly as Daryl and this group move closer to conflict, right? I mean, how soon is it before Laurent gets captured, by the bad guys, and then Daryl has to rescue him, which means Daryl's got to go there, and take them on, and so then he'll find out a little bit more, right? I mean, I think that's pretty much a given that we'll see that. So, but it was a very interesting little scene that kind of, it's an interesting choice because it totally stops the narrative. And instead we're like, why are we pausing on? You know what I mean? It's like the whole part of the whole the through line for this episode is, find Daryl, get Daryl for Caudron, and yet they take a good 2 minutes of the 42-minute runtime to show this experiment with really no explanation of what's going on. And then no reference to it after it's over because no one, he kind of watches it and he's like, good, let's go get Daryl. You know what I mean? And he's gone, I mean? So yeah, it was an interesting choice.
And I was also going to say too, like, not only did it not have anything else to do with the rest of the episodes, just sort of there. And then Caudron's like, okay, let's go. But she specifically was like, come with me. So she specifically showed it to him.
Right.
But doesn't say why, and there's no explanation why she did that at all. So I hope, even if we don't just see any more of the actual experiments in this season, or any more detail, I mean, this is Chekhov's experimental, zombies. If we don't see one try and attack Daryl or Laurent or Isabel at some point before the end of the season, then that was a wasted scene. So I would assume we'll at least see some of the, and if it's not one of the ones that have been experimented on, then maybe one, we know that they have like a container somewhere filled with ghouls that they're going to use for experimentation. They're going to like toss them in there or something, you know what I mean? Like, we're going to see that again in some way, but it'd be great to see, at least get some explanation from Genet about like, what's the reasoning behind showing this to Caudron? Like, why did that happen? Why was it important for him to know about this before he went out to go and, do your bidding, as it were? But hopefully we'll get that. Yeah. I do want to say that I'm curious about, before we move on to other things, because, this was sort of a contained scene until we see Caudron again at the very end. So in this scene, I was wondering about the scientists that we see at the very end of World Beyond, that little bonus scene that we got where we first were introduced to, the people in France back there. And I'm curious about like that scientist was, and maybe it's said in that scene, but I'm curious if that scientist was working with a separate group. Was she working with Genet and like got like with the Poivre group and got separated or left that group because of the experiments they were doing? I don't know. But it made me think about that scientist and what, where they are connected into this story, if at all. And I contend that there has got to be some kind of connection that sort of circles back to the CRM from America. So
yeah, maybe again, they've done a very good job of not telling us much.
Yes.
And they're really good at that. The show really excels at keeping things very opaque. So it's just we have all of these different little pieces of this puzzle, but we don't even know what the picture of the puzzle is that we're trying to make the pieces fit, so it's very hard to kind of come up with any theories, because it literally could be anything, because they've told us so little.
I know it really could be, but it makes me sad, because I want them to, I want there to be connections. Because sometimes when they do this, like, connect back to the main series or connect back to something else in the fandom, it's Easter eggy, it's small, it's, something, it's fan servicey, but this is different. This is more like, world building stuff. And I hope it's too big for it to not connect. So it'd be disappointing if they didn't, I guess, I don't know. And you're right. We have not had enough information in this series to know if it ultimately will, but I really, really hope they do connect it over. It would make so much sense to me, at least.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just caution you, and just be careful what you wish for. 'Cause, back when the X-Files was on TV in the 90s, everybody wanted to know what's the conspiracy, and they didn't tell us. And then when they finally told us, it was stupid. So just be careful, because right now your imagination, it's like, the beginning of Jaws, right? You're like, oh my God, what is it? What could it be? And your imagination is 1 billion times better than anything anyone can ever come up with on TV or in a movie. And then when you finally see the shark, you're like, oh, that looks like a fake shark, because it is.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is, So just be careful, right?
I know. It's hopeful wishes. We'll see.
Right. Exactly.
And so we move away from there.
Well, before we do that, I just wanted to add the scene where Caudron meets with Jeanette or Genet. First of all, a couple of things. Clearly, a lot of time has passed from when they set out from the convent to when that scene took place, because he was no longer limping.
Yes.
So his wounds had healed, and he was shot by Daryl twice, right? So he's recovered enough. So we get at least a bit of a sense of time that it's been, probably, 3-4 weeks at a minimum from when we last saw these characters at the end of episode 2, which I thought was interesting. And second of all, I really felt that Genet was, she didn't really see him as a true believer. She saw him as a resource to exploit, because that's kind of been her MO so far. And that he is just obsessed with getting Daryl because, my God, he killed his brother. And so she's like, all right, I'll use that.
Right.
And like you said, you know what? You go after Daryl Dixon, and if he kills you, I don't care.
Yeah, we're still going to be looking for him, and why waste my resources when you can waste yours?
Exactly. And clearly this guy is committed to, to finding him and tracking him down and hunting him to the ends of the earth. Whereas if she were to give it to one of her people, they'll be like, okay, it's a job. And if I get it done, great. And if I don't, okay. Whereas that guy's like not going to sleep until he you know what I mean? It's so much more immediate.
Obsessive.
Yeah, exactly. That she's like, fine, I'm going to exploit that and give him enough resources to help him out. Because, he has like a whole crew with him that are armed to the teeth. So she does that. But again, it's sort of like, fine, I'll let you go out and hunt him down. And if you happen to get him, great. And if not, I don't care. So I didn't necessarily see her being like, ooh, here's a guy that I'm going to move into my organization and, make my number 2. And no, I think she's just like, okay, fine, whoever you are, go out and hunt him down. So, So anyway, but that was just my take on it. So.
Oh, no. Good one. That's a good take. We move away from the Codron stuff back to Daryl and Isabel, who they have to find some items to barter in order to talk to. They were told by Falou that there are some people that might be able to help them, but you have to bring items to trade.
Yeah.
And
even
so
information.
Yeah. And so Isabel's like, I have an idea. And
I know I can find some
things. And it's interesting because in my head, I was like, she's going to go back to her place. I guarantee it. But I'm like, but she took that box with her stuff. So I was curious, like, what is she going to grab? Well, why have one hidey hole in the fireplace when you can have two is really what subheading of the episode should be.
Did she actually take the box in the first episode? I mean, she put stuff in it and, like took out some cash, I think. But I mean, did she? I thought I was almost going to rewatch episode 1 to see if they definitively show that she has the box with her when they come down to the car, because I didn't remember that.
I don't remember either, but I do remember that when she went to get the box from the fireplace when she first came home, she reached up to get it. And in this case, she pulled the grate up and it was hidden underneath.
Okay.
So that's why I thought there were two different boxes.
That very well could be.
Plus, when she opened up the box to put stuff in it, she just had like money and jewelry and things. And in this one,
and stuff.
Yeah, this one was drugs
and more drugs.
Yeah, it felt like the drugs were the majority of the thing in this box, as opposed to it was sort of like you said, money and passports and jewelry and things in the other box. So that's why I thought it was two. So but either way,
I have to say I was a little disappointed that when we see what's in the box, that there wasn't a little baggie of blue crystal meth. I was really hoping that they were going to do that AMC connective tissue thing again.
Yeah, and they may still do it. Just because she didn't have it doesn't mean they won't use it to trade, and someone will have it in them. So we'll have to keep our eyes out for it.
It would have been just such an easy thing to do. You don't have to reference it. No one has to go, oh, it's blue. You know what I mean? Just have it in there, and then all of us, junkies would be like, oh my god, it's the blue stuff. So
yeah.
It
different kind of junkies, people.
Yes. Yeah, but yeah, you know what I mean? It's just all of us crazy people that watch all this stuff would be like, holy crap, it's like the car that Glenn got,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Daryl's old boss who used to call everybody little bitch. I mean, it's just they've made that reference a couple times, and I was definitely a little disappointed, I guess. That's like, oh, that would have been so easy, because it looked like there was some crystal meth in there in one of the baggies. Yeah. And it's you guys could have just put some blue food coloring in there and just really made everybody go crazy on the internet.
That would have been so much fun.
Yeah. Anyway, continue.
But alas, no, just a box full of drugs, and it's great because she starts pulling out the little baggies and realizes that Daryl is staring, and her reaction is, "I wasn't always a nun." And he says, "I see that," because it's pretty clear.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So there's that.
Well, remember when they first get in there, he says something like, "Wow, you have noisy neighbors," because I think there are ghouls that are across the courtyard making noise or something. And her line is like, "Yeah, it's the so-and-sos. They were always trying to fix me up with her son." And so that should tip off Daryl that, okay, you know what? This girl lived in this apartment. She was not a nun when she lived here in this apartment, So.
Right. And what's interesting to me is when she found the picture of her sister and she took it out of the frame to keep, I'm not sure it was clear to me, but it seems as though when we were getting the backstory on Laurent, did she tell that story to Daryl? Because he appears to sort of know. He knows all of the stuff about her sister, and she takes the picture and she basically says, like, he doesn't have a picture of her, and I'm like, oh, she means Laurent, and I'm like, wait, Daryl knows the whole story? Like, I'm not sure that was clear.
It wasn't. You're right. It was not. And I think Daryl knew that, and I got the sense that Laurent knows that his mom was her sister.
Right.
And I think that much was known because, again, she didn't know who the dad was at this point.
Yeah, that's a mystery for sure.
Right. And so I think that part of the story of her flashback had been conveyed to Daryl somewhere along the way. We don't actually see it, but he is aware that, okay, she came to the convent with her sister. Her sister was in the throes of dying from a bite and about to give birth, and eventually passed away, but the baby somehow survived, and like we pointed out, doesn't have the zombie fever or anything for some reason, which they all took to mean it's a miracle and he's the Messiah. That part of the story, I think Daryl knew. And so when she finds the picture of the sister, it's like, and says that's not surprising to him. But then he is present with her when she's having that little talk with Quinn about, baby daddies and mistakes and that kind of stuff that happens later on. But you're right. It was definitely a little confusing because I'm like, when did she tell him this? And
I mean, they did share a bed together, and they were kind of chatting about their past. And sometimes people will do that, like in a narrative sense, like when this person is having this flashback in their head, what's happening in real time is she's telling the story, but we're seeing it played out at like a movie almost. So I'm okay with that. And here's the thing. That's one of those things that you make the jump when you have a shortened span of time to tell the narrative. You just have, they created this situation where they made it so that Daryl was sort of telling Isabel things that he maybe hadn't told other people. And it felt like she was doing something similar. So it was very easy for my brain to make the leap to, did she tell him? Oh, well, she must have. You know what I mean? As opposed to, like, say something like Fear the Walking Dead, they would just totally screw that all up and would be like, when did that happen? How did that happen? But when you have good writing and good character development, it wasn't hard for me to make that jump. And then, you just forgive it, like you were saying about some of the other stuff. You just toss it up to, well, they only have 6 episodes and they've got a compressed sort of storyline. My brain can make that leap that, yes, they have an intimate relationship so far in terms of like talking about their past, and it's at least like a safe space to talk about your past. So I could totally see that conversation happening, and it didn't bother me that I hadn't seen it. It was just for a hot second I was like, did this happen? It must have, because it happened.
Well, and the other thing it could be too is that Laurent could easily have bored Daryl to tears by telling him the story of his mom, of what he knows, right?
That's absolutely true. Absolutely, and again, true.
since we just got done saying that, at least 3-4 weeks have passed between episode 2 and episode 3 of them just on the road, slowly moving it. It's very likely that this subject has come up at some point, and Daryl has heard the story 9 times already. So again, we didn't actually see it, but there are enough possibilities, I think, like you said, that's like, you're like, okay, I get it. I could see that somewhere along the line somebody told Daryl the backstory here, at least enough of it for him to go, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah So I forgive it. It just
It was definitely weird because I'm like, I don't remember that conversation happening.
But it was one of those things where like it only took me out for like a hot second. I was like, like I said, I was like, did this happen? I don't think it did. You know what? It probably happened off screen. I'm fine with it. Move on.
Yeah, move on. We're good.
Yeah. So of course they get pinned in by the dead, and they have to go out a different way than they came in, and end up exiting through like a courtyard in the back of the building, it looked like. And of course they run into the little girl. She was like the Chekhov's little girl. She's gonna show up again in the second act.
Yeah.
When they showed her driving away, I was like, oh yeah, we're gonna see her. And we did.
Well, and the only thing you can say for that girl is she had zero curiosity because she was not nosy at all.
Yeah.
See what I did there?
Oh, poor little Amy.
Poor little Amy.
Nose.
Yep. That
Amy
was my
nose.
That she knows. She does not know. She knows. My comment was, guess Amy didn't make it. She didn't listen to her. She didn't stay with her mom. It's like, yep. Yeah. Wanted to go out in the courtyard and ride her scooter, and now she's dead. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens, people, when you don't listen.
That's right.
I guess.
Again, we have no context. That girl could have died, a month after she left. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't know. You have no idea when anything happened. So,
yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely a nice little shock moment, and the makeup was great. And I liked how they, clearly that little ghoul had been standing in that courtyard long enough that the weeds had grown up around her legs to where she couldn't really move.
Which is crazy, but awesome. I'm glad that they're showing that. It's definitely a really great way to show like the time has passed. And it reminded me a lot of those ghouls they did a good job with in Worlds Beyond, where they had to show, these ghouls have been out here for 10 years. We made such a big deal of talking about the 10-year anniversary stuff in this episode. And as these kids are making their way out into the world, there's these ghouls that are like covered in moss, or like they've been sitting there for so long that like the earth is starting to sort of reclaim them. And sort of what's happening with Amy here too. Amy No-Nos. I'm sorry.
Amy No-Nos. Yes. And also too, of course you get the suicide ghouls that start falling out of the windows, which was great. But the back door that she's trying to get him to, the vines are so thick that he can't open it. He can't open it. He can't get out. And so again, Daryl, in a moment I think where Daryl's being very Daryl, he gets one of the ghouls that is advancing on her, and he runs it through with a spear of some sort, and uses its sort of acid face to melt away the vines. He like literally pushes it up against the door, and enough of the vines melt away that he can finally push the door open. And I thought that was very clever of him. That was him taking Chekhov's acid in episode 1 and going, hey, we can use that. So.
And it was Daryl being Daryl again, taking something new that he just learned and going, hey, I can use this for something, and being smart, like Apocalypse smart. And it hasn't been happening a lot in this series, to be fair, but it was nice to see him in the moment be able to like, boom, make a decision about something and use it in a way we haven't seen yet. And it works for the scene that he's in and helps them, sort of escape and get out of there. And it made sense. It was cool.
I agree.
Yeah. They meet up with their group of people from the nest, and they head over to where they're going to meet up with the wherever they're going to meet this person who is going to help them in some way. I'm using air quotes again. So whoever they're going to barter with. And
I thought it was cool that the leader of the group there, Falu, however you pronounce his name, that he repeatedly is telling Daryl that like, hey, you helped us get the kid here, so we're gonna do everything we can to hold up Isabel's end of the arrangement. Because they could have been like, yeah, sorry, we don't really have a radio and we don't really know much about boats, but thanks for bringing the kid.
Yeah, and they could have been like, listen, we didn't make this deel, Isabel did, and
yeah. And they could have just been like, you're welcome to stay here or you're welcome to leave, but we're kind of done. But they weren't. They're like, no, we're gonna they go there, they bring stuff to trade, they bring the guy the hazelnuts so they can get in. I mean, like, they're committed to at least keeping their word, which again, like we said earlier, this is a rarity in The Walking Dead.
Oh
right?
God, yes. So rare.
Yeah. So yeah, and I thought that it was refreshing to see that that guy and not only is he helping, but like he went there with them to help. It could have just been, I'll send somebody. No, he went, So yeah, I really like that.
Yeah. To get to this secret location where they're going to meet this secret person who can help them with Daryl in some secret way, we don't know how, they have to travel there through the catacombs, which I thought was just visually amazing. I mean, it's just so cool. All of those skulls, and there's just nothing like it in the world that looks like it, and it's a very Paris thing, but it just is. It suits the show. I mean, a bunch of skeleton skulls certainly suits a show about zombies for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So
absolutely.
I thought it was very, very cool. It would have been disappointing if they'd done a whole show in Paris and didn't go down there.
Gone into the catacombs. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that would have been stupid.
I wasn't overly excited about what they eventually get to in the catacombs, but I did like the journey through the catacombs.
Yeah. Agreed. When they get to the end of the catacombs, they, like Steve was saying, they sort of do a little bit of a trade to sort of grease the palms of the guy that's at the door. Falou has some hazelnuts, which the guy likes. And they have to get rid of their weapons before they can enter, which is all pretty standard for stuff like this. And then when they enter, they go down like this hallway or whatever, and they are in, without question, a nightclub that is, like you were saying in the beginning, it's like equal parts Mad Max. There's a smidge of Total Recall's bar in there. There's a little bit of Moulin Rouge in there. I mean, there's a lot going on in there. And
first of all, the name of the club is Moulin Rouge. You know that, right?
Boom chick.
And it is so completely French that, of course, the master of ceremonies is a cross-dresser transvestite, right? I mean, they go every kind of standard block you could put into this club to say it's in France. They've got the torch singer there that is doing the numbers and of course singing in front of the Elvis microphone that is the very, very famous mic that you see all the time, which is like one of the worst mics there is, but yet it's the most iconic looking, so that everybody's like, I want the Elvis mic. Okay, fine. But yeah, and I'm not saying there can't be a nightclub. I think if there's ever going to be a functioning nightclub in the ZA, it's going to be in France, in Paris. But it's just, the thing that got me crazy is, where's the power coming from? I mean, they have electric lights. They have a sound system that works. They've got, it's where's all they have like neon signs on, for Christ's sake. Where's all this coming from?
Come on now. Don't try and spread your logic here, sir. We don't have time for it.
But I mean, they've been doing such a great job. They totally could have had this club with candlelight and lanterns, and you could still have, the guy or the gal, sorry, doing the singing on the stage, but she's just singing. She doesn't have a microphone in front of her. And instead of like a soundtrack playing, they've got a band that's playing, string instruments and horns and stuff. I mean, they totally could have done it that way. For whatever reason, the last couple of years, people just have this idea in their head that, well, of course the electricity is still going to work. And I don't get it. I mean, I understand from a standpoint of they wanted to have a club, they wanted to have all that stuff, and so they just said, yeah, you know what, somehow the electricity works and we're just going to do it. But it's bothersome to me because I don't see how it could.
And I think I don't disagree. Like I take that back. I disagree a little bit in the sense that I think that it is possible for there to be sources of electricity after the apocalypse if you're smart and you employ the right people. But are they being wasted on a nightclub is the question. Like, are we utilizing whatever little bits of natural resource we have in order to create electricity so we can say run a windmill so that we can have a grist mill to make bread, or have something else that's automated that would lead to like some type of food production or what, do you know what I mean? Like,
right.
I feel like the frivolity of a nightclub would not be the place where you would use the electricity. And you're right. They missed an opportunity to make it even more, French and, be very like daring and dramatic and it would make it feel more underground as well. If you had like nothing but candles, nothing but like, lanterns and things like that. And, gas powered lanterns or what have you.
Well, and they did. If you watch that scene again, there are lit candles on the tables.
Right.
So, but again, they also have neon lights up on the ceiling, and obviously the stage has its own colored lights and, all of the stage lights and stuff. And clearly the PA system works. But we didn't really mention this, but the scene with Cadron and Jeanette, I mean, that whole facility was running with electric lights and they had tons of power too. So this is just something that for AMC and the Walking Dead universe, the powers that be have just decided that whenever the end comes with the ghouls, that somehow the electric is still going to work. Yeah.
I would also say too, and I don't know that they would even go here, but I also know that Europe has embraced alternative energy sources way more than the US has. So they have way more, wind turbines and solar panels and things set up so that they aren't really a part of a standard grid like we are used to. So like I said, I think it's possible for those little pockets to exist. I mean, look at Alexandria. They were on solar power. So they were able to have a lot of the stuff that they had in the homes, etc., but on a limited basis. They still used candles. They still used, stuff like that where they needed to. I agree with you. Like, it's crazy that it's as prevalent as it is. I don't think it's crazy for it to be there. I think it's crazy for it to be like universal, pretty much, like you're saying, without any comments on the reality of it. Like what's the reality of actually having that much electricity? It's not very realistic, to be fair.
Yep.
So we get introduced to a couple of thugs. They're trying to negotiate. And of course, it's not them that are in charge. There's always someone higher up. There's always someone else who's in charge. And we know someone has been watching. They've been showing like the camera from the angle of being like on the shoulder of the person who's watching everything go down. And of course, the guy in charge is Quinn.
Of
who
course.
is the guy that, was with Isabel before in the last episode, and she left him on the side of the road. And so he not sure how happy he's gonna be to see Isabel, since the last time he saw her, she was, driving away in his car.
Mm-hmm.
So that immediately creates a whole bunch of tension, and then even more tension when he reveals, oopsie. And Steve, did you get something right here?
First time. Ding, 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 ding. Actually, that's not true. I think I did successfully predict that what's her name on World Beyond was the commander's daughter.
Yes,
I think I pegged that one too. But I did make the prediction that Quinn was the baby daddy. It's solely based on how he reacted when she brought the sister down with them, and she's like, "I got to take my sister with me," and he's just like, "Oh God, this is not going to work out," and sure enough, we kind of get that too, because he's like, "Oh, is it?" Because he sees Laurent, because they bring Laurent with them for some reason, because you bring your kid to a bar in France, and and he's like, "Oh, is this your son?" And she's like, "No, it's Lily's." And then that immediately, he doesn't beat around the bush. He just spills his guts and says, well, he should get to know his father, because, it's important for a boy to know the father. So I should get to talk to him, you know what I mean? And then suddenly she's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, and he gives the usual, it was a stupid mistake and one-time thing and all that stuff. And, kind of dancing over the fact that he was two-timing her at the time with her sister.
Yeah.
But, we're just, although again, she did steal his car and leave him in the middle of the apocalypse. So maybe this kind of evens them out a little. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, and so that, the big takeaway is that he wants the boy. So now we have yet another, faction that is going to be trying to hunt down Laurent for their own, own ends here. So it's just making the kind of bringing the story into full focus. We know who all the teams are, and now we can see what happened. But yeah, I did kind of have that moment of like, son of a birch, I'm right.
Yeah. Like, I'm not right very often, but
I know
look, it happens.
This is a weird feeling for me. So yeah.
I did, and I liked, too, that he didn't just reveal he was the father, but as he and Isabel kind of get into it a few moments later, he reveals, too, that he is the one that found her after, yes, the marks on her wrists, they are a suicide attempt she did. And he even says that he saved her from the bathtub, and he pulls her arm and like reveals her scars there. So it makes it pretty clear that she had clearly tried to kill herself.
Yes.
Cut wrists, and he found her and saved her and nursed her back to health, kind of thing is what it sounded like. So that's an interesting sort of wrinkle to her that we didn't know about before. We suspected, because we saw those.
We saw the scars, but we didn't really know what the story was. And I think he's trying to kind of play that card of like, not only did you, leave me on the side of the road, but I kind of saved your life. So, you owe me this bit with your nephew, my son, kind of a thing. So, it was a nice way to kind of give a reveal on what that storyline was with her scars without having to go too much into detail. And again, we'll see. Maybe she will talk about it a little bit more with Daryl later on. But yeah, I like that moment too.
Yeah, and it's great too, because like we didn't have to see the scene, which would have been triggering for a lot of people. We just needed the information, the confirmation. Yes, there was a thing. He saved her from it. So I guess ultimately we should be thankful to him, but he's trying to get some pretty sort of late in the game, like thank yous for something from years and years ago that I'm sure she thanked him since then. But I don't know. I like it. It helped us see some of their past a little more clearly as well. So things aren't going well, and Daryl decides, let's get out of here. Basically, he's like, give me my son, and I'll help you out, is sort of how he said it. He's like, you should give him to me, kind of thing. And Daryl's like, no, that's not going to happen. We're out of here. And Isabel was very like, I'll handle this. I've got it. And he's like, no, I don't want to put you through any. He basically forces Isabella to leave when she was very much like, I don't need you to save me. I can take care of myself. And I thought that it was a very interesting, like, I'm not sure what she was planning on doing to, get the help that Daryl needed. What was she willing to sacrifice in that moment?
Yeah. Well, Quinn makes it clear that the only way he's going to help Daryl make the connections to get on a ship is if he gets his son. I mean, that's kind of the price that he sets. Right. And Daryl, you're right. Daryl's not having any of it. He's like, no, we're done. And that's where I think Isabel takes a little exception with that, going, look, what, this is, it's my decision about what's going to happen here, not yours. And of course, Daryl's like, I don't see it that way, and so they immediately get up and they leave. And, Quinn lets him go. Quinn doesn't, keep him there or anything. But pretty soon after they leave, then the bad guys show up and, they're like, where's the American? We know he was here. And based on the fact that the very next scene, the bad guys show up at the nest, it's pretty obvious that Quinn gives them up.
Yeah.
And tells them, they're with this group and that's where they are. So, but it was, I wonder, how far would Isabel have gone, to kind of make things right with Daryl?
I don't think she would have given up Laurent, but I think she was considering some type of sacrifice of herself, whatever that may be, in that moment. And I like I said, I don't know what that was going to entail, but that's her nephew, and he is the Messiah. I don't think she was prepared to give Laurent up at all. But I think in order to save Laurent from Quinn and also help Daryl at the same time, she would have been willing to do something. And I think like that's all. I think Daryl also saw that starting to, form in her mind, and he needed to, and that's why she was like, I don't need you to save me, because whatever it was, she wanted to be able to make that decision on her own, and he took her out of it. But I'm curious to see how that's all gonna play out, because she really, really, in the moment there, really wanted to be able to help him. She's pretty stubborn about it. And he basically had to kind of drag her out of there. And it's a good thing he did, because like you said, the Cadron and his heavies show up there eventually, and want to know what the hell's going on, damn it. And then from there, obviously, they head over to the nest. And just before they show up, we get the most like we knew it was going to happen kind of scene, which is, Daryl and Isabel they're arguing over stuff, and it's mostly about Laurent, and he deserves to at least know about his dad and
stop lying to him.
Yeah, you got to stop lying to him about stuff, like, because obviously, he has this tall tale about my dad was a hero and and that's not really true, and he deserves to have the truth told to him. And they're having this argument, and Laurent is like, I can hear you, and I hate both of you. And he goes to run, and like literally right after he says that, Cadron
shows up.
Yeah. And thankfully, Laurent goes and sort of hides right away. So he's been trained very well by the nuns, that if there's any kind of trouble to hide away, and he does, thankfully. And then Daryl says, he just shouts out as he leaves, he's like, I'll meet you at your place. and then he runs like and gets like sort of draws Kadron out and runs away, hoping obviously that Kadron follows him, which he does. And they fight, they tussle. He was just about to kill Kadron. He had him pinned and was choking him, and he gets
chokehold, and
and there was one of Kadron's soldiers or minions is was also following the pursuit, and they shot a gun, and Daryl had to sort of move out of the way and loosened his grip, and he runs away and makes it to a different rooftop, and wouldn't that be the case that he'd find the one rooftop that's gonna cave in, and he does.
Oh yeah, well it's the so far it's the first cliffhanger ending we've gotten from this series. So
see what happened? He fell from a cliff, pretty much.
He did, kind of. Yeah. It was a roof cliff, cliff roof.
Yeah, roof cliff.
But yeah, and yeah, I mean it's certainly like, oh, of course, he picks the one roof that he falls through, but realistically, 10 years after the end, when there's nobody to maintain anything, I would think a lot of those roofs would be very unstable, and you go up there on your own peril. I mean, it's not just the roofs, the floors. I mean, everything. You go up off the ground floor anywhere in France and anywhere in the world 10 years after all the maintenance people have, turned into ghouls. You're taking your life into your own hands. I mean,
yeah, and I would say too, like, that could have just been a generally weak roof that he was on, but he literally was like right in the center of it.
Oh yeah.
So even if it was only just like moderately weak, he was at like the absolute point where if it's going to go right where he's standing, and that's where he was standing. Yeah. But he had kind of like a look on his face of, because it starts to crack first.
Yeah, and
he's got that.
And he's like,
man,
yeah.
And then it cracks and he falls and.
Yep. Cut to black and bang. Then there you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I thought there was an interesting ending, a different take. Anything we excuse me. Is there anything we sort of jumped over? I think I got everything on my list. Is there anything we haven't captured on yours?
I thought there was a fun little moment when Daryl's talking with these two guys before Quinn shows up, and the two guys demand to see what they have to trade, and they, she opens up her bag and they see all the drugs, and then Daryl's like, yeah, forget it, we're leaving, because he doesn't like, something doesn't, smell right to him about how the deal's going down. And one of the guys pulls out a switchblade, and of course, Daryl punches him in the face and disarms him. And that's when Quinn comes over, and Quinn kind of lets everyone know, hey, my rules, there are no weapons allowed in here. And the guy's like, I'm really sorry. And he's just like, the rules. And so he hands the switchblade to the MC. And I just thought it was a really great moment where, clearly the MC has done this a lot. And she starts walking back with the switchblade, and she's like, boys will be boys.
Yeah.
so I thought that was a fun little line. And like I said, I liked a lot of the denizens of the nightclub. I just didn't particularly enjoy the electricity aspect of the nightclub. So
yeah. I thought that it was a really nice little sort of tongue-in-cheek thing to say, considering the MC was the drag queen.
Yeah.
So it was very like, a little gender byplay there, which I thought was, was a little extra layer of funny to that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And that character was really cool. It's like, clearly, they're in a position of authority in that club. And so it's like, all right, I want to see more of this person.
And I also liked, just for continuity's sake, we do have the siren singer, who's the one who gave like the little Eiffel Tower necklace to Laurent, which I thought was cute.
Quinn's girlfriend.
Yeah, absolutely. She was an actual singer, And then the MC, who's the drag queen, was performing later when Kadran enters.
Right.
And then it's clear when they're like, things sort of stop and they're like, they sort of scatter. The MC drag queen was lip syncing, which is a far more common thing for drag queens to do, is to have like a popular song and lip sync to it. And then so I just thought the authenticity was very, cool to show that.
Well, they have all kinds of entertainment at the Moulin Rouge.
Jeez. Voulez-vous coucher? Let's not go down that road. All right. I think we did it. I think we hit all of our points. Not bad, us.
Yeah. The only other thing I think that you put down there was, the scene in her apartment where they're both kind of talking about what they were like before the world ended. Yeah. And she kind of they both kind of admit that they were kind of a mess before the world ended, and they kind of pulled their shirt together after. And her line was something like broken until the world ended. And he just kind of laughed. And I thought that was kind of a very insightful little look at both of them.
Yeah, because they really were in their own very separate ways, having, even though they were their lives were crappy in very different ways, in terms of like pathway to, getting better, there really wasn't one for either one of them. They were sort of in a rut of like, things are just going to get worse and worse. And exactly that. They are two of the people that like became better people because of the apocalypse. So
it took the world to literally stop for them to change, literally, change and become better people. Yeah.
Which is, kind of hopeful in its own little cute little way. Yeah.
So you're basically saying I need the apocalypse? That's what you're telling me?
I don't think even the apocalypse would help you.
Oh man.
Aw. That should be a compliment for you. Side. All right, folks, that's gonna do it for our chat about the episode. We're gonna go ahead and take a quick break. We come back, we're gonna do a handful of cool things. We're gonna discuss our listener feedback on what's coming up on the podcast. We're also gonna chat a little bit about our 300th episode.
Yay! So please, everyone, stick around, because we'll be right back.
Now there's about 20 of them out there.
What will we do?
Don't worry, we're safe in here. They'll never get in.
Why is it that in every zombie story, people always think that their safe haven is invulnerable?
I know. It's like, hello, the walkers are totally gonna get in. You better get ready for it.
No! Diane, get behind me. No, it's not stopping.
Do something, Jack!
And another thing, how come nobody in a zombie story has ever seen a zombie story?
Do you know how much time in human life would be saved if just one person in the group was up on the genre?
What do we do?
Aim for the head.
What?
Aim for the head.
You heard them. Aim for the head.
Quick, Diane, I think we should try and fix the barricades.
I think we should listen to them.
Now, that's the first good idea they've had all episode.
I still don't think they're gonna make it.
Aim for the Head, a weekly podcast covering the hit AMC programs The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead. Join hosts Diana and Steve as they recap and discuss the latest episodes. Aim for the Head, available on iTunes. You can also follow them on Facebook.
Hey there, this is Greg Nicotero, and you're listening to Aim for the Head podcast with Diana and Steve. And don't forget to always aim for the head, because body shots, they really just don't work.
Hey, everybody, we are back. We are going to go ahead and jump right into our listener feedback for episode 3. When we're done with that, we're going to chat a little bit about, our 300th episode. You know how
300th episode.
300. But first up, let's go through our feedback we got for Daryl Dixon episode number 3. Steve, why don't you go first?
All righty. Well, our first piece of feedback comes via the email, and this is in our international desk from our pal Bev2 over in Devon, England. Hello, Bev.
Hey, Bev.
And she starts out by saying, "Hi, guys. I may have just sent you the beginning of an email by accident. Please ignore it if I did. In my defense, I have a very tired, full-up brain, and that is in need of a holiday. And I agree. I am right there with you.
Mm-hmm.
She goes, I hope you're both well. Happy 300th episode. Oh, thank you.
Aw.
That's very sweet of you. She goes, this was another solid episode. It felt a little slow in places, but those quieter moments helped character relationships develop. I think that the guy with the zombie orchestra must be the craziest dude that we've seen in the entire universe. I'm not sure why Sylvie had trouble shooting the walker. I think she killed the most bad guys back at the monastery. Yeah, that's true. And I think, what you said, Dee, is that she didn't want to make any noise. So she was sort of like, I'm not sure, and of course, Daryl came out and said, let me show you how we do it in America, baby. We make a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Anyway, so she goes on to say, it seemed this week that Daryl made less out of character decisions. Using the burner walker to get rid of the vines was quick thinking. We agree. Mm-hmm. Although I don't understand why the kid had to go to the nightclub with them. I thought that was an odd. I mean, the only reason was so he could run into Quinn, and that's like, you got to come up with a reason.
Yeah.
And other than it's France and the drinking age is like 6 or something there, so maybe they just like, you bring your kid to the club. We don't know. She goes on, I'm sure he would have been safer at home. Yes, he would have been safer at the nest. He absolutely would have.
Yes.
The falling walkers were really cool and creepy. Do we think the experiments are made to make super strength zombies to use in battles? That's, again, it's a really good question. And like my point was that we don't really know what they're doing, but my feeling is they're trying to weaponize them.
Yes.
They want to be able to use they're the biggest resource that you have now in terms of just what's available. And so why not find a way to make them, something you can use in a combat situation. So I think so. I think you're right that now, whether it's super strength or it's exploding heads or acid for brains or whatever, they're trying to do something to make them weaponized. So I think you're right on there, Bev. And then, this next part, I have to say, she goes, Steve must be super pleased with himself for working out that Quinn is the kid's dad. And you know what? I am. Yay.
Yay for me.
She goes, gold star for seeing that coming. Thank you. I'm going to put that right on the fridge so everyone can see. She goes, I think we all knew that Laurent would overhear the conversation about his calling and father's identity, and that this would cause him to run away at the worst possible moment. Yes, it did. All in all, this was another good episode. And she signs it off saying, Bev, in still stormy Devon. So, Bev, I'm sorry that you're still getting some bad weather there, but, come on, it's England. What did you expect? But thank you for writing in the feedback. It's I think right on point, and I think we are pretty much agreeing with what you said. Dee, can you remember any character that's crazier than the orchestra dude off the top of your head?
Not in that way. Not really. Fear the Walking Dead has had a couple of characters that are like crazy with no there's no context to this guy. We just meet him, he's there for a hot second, and then he's gone, and we'll probably never see him again. I don't know that we've had exposure to anyone that's really quite like that, not that I can think of.
The people that I would come up with, they're crazy, but they're like evil, maniacal, like Teddy from Fear, or the governor, or people like that. And this guy, he wasn't a evil guy. He wasn't trying to kill them and take their stuff or whatever. He just was nuts.
Just wanted to keep the culture alive.
The culture, yeah, he kept looking back at him like, isn't this great? And they're just like, oh my God. But he's just like, yep, this is what I've been doing with my time, and so yeah, it's a different kind of crazy. And I think, Bev, you're absolutely right in that way of just sort of a benign character who is not a threat to anyone, but he's just flipping nuts.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, thanks for writing in this week, Bev. We love hearing from you. Next up, we heard from our pal Karen, not related to Lauren Cohen, via the Facebook. And she writes in and says, hello, congratulations on 300 episodes. Thanks, Karen. And she says, looking forward to many more. Yeah, we had a conversation right before we started recording about, hitting episode 500. And Steve's like, well, I'll be in my 60s and you'll be like 52. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably true. But yes, we look forward to many more as well. Thank you, Karen. We appreciate that. And about the episode, she goes on and she says, this episode was good and funny. So now Daryl wants to protect the horse. Wow. Zombie band. Pass. Haha. The GD upgrade. The boy is going to turn Sylvie. That boy is going to turn Sylvie. Oh,
the boy that she dances with. Who
yeah.
Was, obviously making the googly eyes at her.
Yeah, she's making the googly eyes right back. I hope nothing happens to her. Yeah, I got bad feelings about, like, anytime someone has, like, a little innocent little love thing that's, Then she goes on and says, why didn't they put that little girl down? I'm curious why they didn't. So,
well, yeah. he wanted to, and she stopped him.
Yeah. Oh, well. She continues on and says, of course it's her old boyfriend, and he's still a dick. What a way to tell someone you cheated on them. I laughed when Daryl fell through the roof. It felt like an old cartoon. I kind of agree with you there, because he definitely had, like I was saying, he had that pause, that shit, and then everything fell. Yeah,
and it was definitely very CGI. You know what I mean? It did not have a very practical feel to it, which I understand. You're not going to let the actor actually fall through the roof. So, but yeah, it definitely had that kind of Coyote versus the Roadrunner moment there, where he like looked up, and then I was surprised he didn't look at the screen and go and then fall. And so, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And she closes out by saying, cheers again to 300. And woohoo! Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate that. So speaking of 300, most of what I put together here, I wanted to sort of go over some sort of like some facts and figures and notes about the podcast itself, which maybe you weren't aware of. And since it's our 300th episode, I felt it was a good way to sort of check in and sort of use it as a marker of all of the things we've accomplished in this 300 episodes. So first off, let's talk Walking Dead shows themselves, because we are a quote unquote Walking Dead universe podcast. A majority of what we've covered has been Walking Dead related. We have covered all but one of the Fear the Walking Dead seasons, which explains why we're so negative about it. The podcast actually started with the coverage of season 2 of Fear the Walking Dead. So if you go all the way back to the beginning and want to listen to some coverage of some Fear the Walking Dead that was actually good, our very first handful of episodes are from that second season of Fear the Walking Dead. We've covered 6 out of the 11 Walking Dead seasons. We even, in the beginning, Julie and I went back, and in the summer, because we started in like April, and we went back that summer and we recapped season 6, which had just ended not long before we started the podcast. And we took the time and went back and covered season 6. So it wasn't in real time, but we did cover the season, so it counts. So 6 out of the 11 Walking Dead seasons were covered by Aim for the Head. And we have covered all of Tales of the Walking Dead, all of the 2 seasons of World Beyond, all of Dead City, and all of Daryl Dixon so far. And we intend to cover the Rick and Michonne show. When Dead City comes back, when Daryl Dixon comes back, we have every intention of covering all of those things. So we will continue to cover all things in the Walking Dead universe. Someday we should do some comic book episodes. I think that would be something that would be very interesting to expand on the universe. But we'll get there. We've also covered quite a few series that were not Walking Dead related. Some of them were just good pop culture things like Game of Thrones, Better Call Saul, and Lost are just a few of the ones that but we have covered a lot of things that were either horror or zombie related or anything like that, which obviously we just covered the first season of The Last of Us. We've covered the 2 seasons of Kingdom, Black Summer, and The Outsider, which wasn't really zombie, but it had a monster. It was kind of horror related.
Oh, very horror. Stephen King.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Dead Set, which was the series that took place in the reality show. God, that was one of my favorite things. That was still one of my favorite
British
things.
Big Brother. Yeah. It was,
so good.
The only time I've ever watched an episode of Big Brother was Dead Set. So, there you go.
And lots of other stuff that sort of falls under, pop culture, kind of scary horror, just good TV, like Stranger Things and Night Of, which was such a great limited series on HBO. And we just covered Chernobyl not too long ago, right after we did Last of Us. So, which was a lot of fun. Even though it's a very, very, very depressing show. We did enjoy, visually, it was just beautiful. We've also covered quite a few movies.
Yes, we have.
And this is just, I'm sure I'm going to miss at least one, but we've covered The Thing, Pontypool, which, God, I love Pontypool. If you haven't seen that movie, guys, you got to watch it. Pontypool, the 2007 Diary of the Dead, the originals, Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, Reanimator, the Fulci movie, Zombie, Shaun of the Dead, which I wrote twice for some odd reason, Shaun of the Dead. I don't know if I was trying to do a Beetlejuice thing there. 28 Days Later, Return of the Living Dead, Evil Dead Rise, Return of the Living Dead 3, and I think there's a lot of movies we've covered that I loved covering Pontypool. I loved covering The Thing because I love that damn movie. I loved when we covered all of the Romero movies because I had never seen them before, and Night of the Living Dead is just such a classic. It's my favorite Romero out of all of them. But I think our crowning jewel has got to be not just the movie, but the timing of covering The Shining and having it appear as episode 237.
Yeah.
That was some pretty good harmonious scheduling there. We did good there.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And I think that's one of our more popular listens to. I think we got a lot of downloads with that one, right?
We do. It's funny too, because like we could cover something like Evil Dead Rise, which is like a more current film, but it's interesting because when you take a classic movie like that and you just get people, because I do that from time to time, I'll just do a search for a podcast on a topic and see what's out there. And, if you were looking for a great podcast on The Shining and, you just search those words, it just brings up any podcast that has covered it. And so we still get traffic from people coming to see that episode. I mean, and the Romero ones too. If people just do a search for Romero. So we have some good numbers on those Romero numbers too. So it's great too, because it's like, I mean, who cares about the numbers? We had such a great time recording all of these. We just love talking about them. And what's been fun too is there's a few of those in that list that are, I love The Shining and have seen it a million times, and the same thing with The Thing, but pretty much everything else is something that Steve has seen that I have not. So it's great. We love covering stuff that way, because then he comes from that years and years of watching horror movies perspective, and I come from at it with such a much more newbie perspective and having never seen the movie before. So we get these really great fresh takes on it, someone who has seen it before and loves it, and someone who has never. So makes for great podcasting. And speaking of great podcasting, another one of our high marks over these 300 episodes has got to be when we were able to interview the amazing Patricia Tallman. If you aren't aware that we did that, then just, back, go in the Wayback Machine to episode number 262. And that's where our interview lies. And it really is. We had such a great conversation with her. She is such a wonderful, wonderful human being, and the work that she does now with her travel company and does these destination, almost like dream travel for people. It's really,
it's like
amazing.
nerd destination. Yeah.
Yes.
She like went to New Zealand on a Middle Earth tour. Amazing. Where people who went were like obviously nerds like us that love Lord of the Rings, and they went to Hobbiton, and they went to a lot of the locations where they film stuff, and like the guy that was driving them around was like in full orc makeup, and so I mean it was just crazy, and yeah, I mean you can just see the passion that she has for that, because she's just as much of a nerd on that stuff as the rest of us, and so yeah, it was she was really super fun and super friendly, and she kind of talked us into interviewing her.
I know, which was great.
I mean, it was so unbelievable when she's like, well, do you guys like want me to be on your podcast? And we like looked at each other like, sure, I guess, yeah, all right, you know. And then sure enough, like 4 or 5 weeks later, we hooked up with her, and she lives in Hawaii, and so she's like sitting out on her lanai, right, in the Pacific Oceans in the background and stuff, and it was a very, very she was very, very cool. It was a wonderful interview, and she had a lot of great stuff to say about her time with George Romero, her time just being a stunt person in Hollywood, and working on all of the shows that she worked on multiple times for years and years and years, and obviously being the lead in the Tom Savini remake of Night and all that. So yeah, it was a really informative interview, and she's just a lovely person. So yeah, that was an amazing time without a doubt.
She is, and I got to give her a plug. She's a great follow on social media, because she is constantly posting some type of behind the scenes picture, whether it's from and it's not always from like something like her Night of the Living Dead with Savini. She's got such an amazing list of things she's worked on in the sci-fi realm too, so it's just like all of these really great images and all of her stunt and double work, and she'll just post stuff. She posts great pictures like every other day. And she's just such a fun follow on Facebook. I enjoy seeing her posts all the time. She's just a wonderful, wonderful human being, and I'm so glad that we were able to spend some time with her on the podcast.
I agree.
Another interesting note is we have one episode that is by and large our most popular episode, and just in downloads. And I'm kind of surprised, but I wonder if it's just it got so much hype because it was the actual end of the series, and it's our coverage of the series finale, Rest in Peace, which is our episode number 274. It is by and large our most downloaded episode out of all of them.
That's interesting.
And what's funny is prior to that, our most downloaded episode for the longest time was the mid-season finale of when they decided to fight back against Negan, the Heart Still Beating, the one where Rick shows up at Hilltop. And it's a really great episode, and it's when he decides to, okay, forget it. Forget this Negan dude. We got to fight back. And it for quite a few years, that's been our number one downloaded episode. I don't know why. It just was. And but it was usurped by episode 274. Sorry about that, folks. if the other one was your favorite episode. Now, of course, we've had different hosts. So, Julie founded the podcast with me. We recorded 114 episodes together, numbered episodes. There were a couple of things here and there, like some preview episodes and a little bit of bonus content here and there, but those don't count toward the numbers, people. Those are just, extras. But yes, 114 episodes that we recorded together, and I'm always so thankful for Julie for going along the ride with me in the beginning and, sharing all of that time with me. And I know we had lots of really great listeners back then. We've transitioned into different listeners now, and some people still listen to us that listened to us back then. So I always want to thank people for sort of sticking with the podcast through our transition from Julie as my co-host to Steve as my co-host. And now Steve and we've recorded over 186 episodes together, and obviously still counting. And we've got a couple here and there, we did our little COVID PSA, again, not a numbered episode, previews here and there, but we've done 186 numbered episodes together, and counting. And I gotta say, folks, with no plans on my part to stop anytime soon. I enjoy doing this podcast every week so much. It's such a great outlet for me. It helps sort of scratch an artistic itch and helps me feel like I'm still connected to some type of artistic community. I mean, if I wasn't doing this podcast, I've always told friends, when people say, what's your dream job, and podcast wasn't a thing. Years ago, I used to say I'd love to be a film critic because I could talk about, a film or TV critic, because I could talk about watching film and TV shows for hours. And I've done it before, you just have a hangout with your friends and I could sit and talk about some new series I've started to watch. I could talk for hours and hours about stuff like that. So this is basically like, to me, that same thing, except other people listen.
That's the crazy part.
I know. It's like there's a table of people sitting next to the table where I'm at with like my friends, and I'm talking about some TV show that I really like, and that whole table is listening in. That's you guys listening into my table because honestly, if I wasn't doing the podcast, that's what I'd be doing. I'd just be sitting at some, late night restaurant somewhere, having bad coffee at like 11 o'clock at night, talking about some TV show I really love or some movie I just saw that I really liked. So, yeah. So I have no plans anytime soon to call it quits in any way, so you're stuck with us. I mean, unless Steve wants to leave, but we'll see.
Well, my contract is up this year, so we'll see how the negotiations go.
We will have to renegotiate. Yeah, and I just want to make sure I take the time to say, it wasn't too long ago, strangely, we were at a convention together, and Steve took the time to sort of, he took me aside and said something really nice to me about really enjoying being on the podcast, really loving the time that he spends here. And I wanted to take this time to embarrass him in front of our listeners and say, right back at you. I love doing this podcast with you every week. I love chatting about whatever we're going to talk about. When we're not doing this podcast, guys, we just hang out and talk about movies and TV that we like. So
we do.
It's literally like just us hanging out, except we turned on the record button. So I've been so happy ever since that you came on as a co-host with me, and I've loved all the work that we've done and all of the heart and energy you've put into the show as well. And I'm so thankful that I get to spend time with you each week and talk about shit we like, yo.
Oh, stop it. I'm getting misty.
Yeah, it's getting verklempt over here.
Yeah, it's been just an unbelievable ride so far, and I, whenever I kind of look back and memories come up on Facebook or something where I'm like, really, we've been doing it this long? And I think part of it is because of COVID, and that that year was just kind of a lost year. That
Yes.
it's kind of, what I mean? It's like you kind of have, stuff happened before the shutdown or after, but like when is kind of hazy to me, And so then I'll be like, oh, wow, that was like 2016. I'm like, that was like 8 years ago, So yeah, I mean, it's been unbelievable, but just crazy fun. And I've been blown away by the reaction that the listeners have given us, and the constant feedback we get every week. When we were doing the Negan show, I mean, it seemed to me the feedback was getting bigger and bigger and longer every week, and I mean, it just it's phenomenal. That like, why would people want to listen to us talk about this stuff? But for whatever reason that they seem to, and it's just been super fun to take the journey with everybody and hear everyone's point of view. So yeah, I'm happy and yet amazed that it's 300 episodes in, but I also am not surprised. So
yeah. On that sort of topic of listeners that we can't believe listen to us on a regular basis, etc. We did get a little bit of feedback from some constant listeners who just wanted to say some nice things about us, and I just, that stuff is just so sweet. Everybody for writing in. We of course heard from our pal Alex Baelish, and Alex has been such a great supporter of ours. And he loves engaging. Alex does a handful of his own podcasts, and he's just so energetic about the medium. He's very dedicated to the podcast he's a part of, and it's so sweet that he takes the time to make our show be a part of his listening life. I know he's got a busy life. He's got a young one at home, and so I love that he takes that time, and his feedback he sent when I was like, does anyone have any things to say about us being our 300th episode? Alex says, OMG, 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 you go. And says, I love listening to you both. You've done such a great job of podcasting on shows you love. And then the show that shall not be named for fear of it getting renewed. And then he threw in a bunch of laughing, crying emojis and some heart emojis. And thanks again for writing in some nice words there, Alex. Like I said, thank you for always being there and being part of our listening crew. We love it. We love hearing from you every week. Absolutely. And we also got some feedback, some surprising feedback from our pal Penny Lennox. Penny said, congratulations. She also specifically said, and I thought this was very sweet, she said, I was so psyched that you were covering Chernobyl. I had been dying to talk about it for so long, and then your coverage was excellent. Oh. And isn't that the sweetest thing you could ever hear in your life?
That's awesome.
That is awesome. And much like Alex, Penny is also a I would say voracious podcaster. She's always involved in something out there. For one thing, she did some really great Yellow Jackets coverage for the Podcastic Network not too long ago. And she's really sharp. She got a good eye, and I'm humbled that she thought that our coverage of Chernobyl was as good as it was. So I thank you, Penny. Your words were very kind, and we loved hearing them. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. That's great.
Yeah. So the only thing you can do to wrap up talking about episode 300 is to, I guess, talk about what's going to be on episode 301.
301.
So next week, we will be discussing episode 4 of The Walking Dead's Daryl Dixon, the continuing adventures of the dirtiest man in America going to France, and they are just like, hey, who cares?
Yeah. You think that is dirty?
I will show you dirty. The title of the episode, Steve mentioned a little earlier, it is La Dame de Fer, and that translates into the Lady of Iron. I'm very curious who that will refer to. I would assume our Genet, the Iron Lady. Yeah. Description of the episode we've gotten so far is pretty simple, but says Daryl and Isabel must negotiate with Quinn, the proprietor of the underground Demi-Monde Club, the last vestige of art and expression in Paris. So dramatic.
Mm-hmm. And remember, it's actually called the Goulon Rouge, but whatever.
It is. Yeah. Yes, the Goulon Rouge. Oh, God. The dad jokes abound. And as a reminder, I don't think you need to be reminded, but I'll remind you anyway. That show that you don't care about is coming back on October the 22nd, which is fast approaching, people. I'm really sorry.
But only 6 more to go.
Yes. And then done forever, which is great. There's a long form trailer that's out there that I watched this week. I watched it so that you don't have to, folks. I'm taking it for the team is what I'm saying. And there's lots of imagery of, fighting and trying to, I don't know. Who the hell knows? The conflict, the final conflict looks like it's going to be between Madison and Strands, which will be interesting, I guess. They revealed the Troy reveal. And like we said before, obviously getting smacked in the hammer, all it does is change the color of your eye, which is good to know. Is good to know. If you could survive an attack with a hammer, you just have to give up the color of your eyeball. That's all. Sure. There's also some imagery that if you are not interested in spoilers, but nobody even really cares about the show, so I'm not sure you really care about spoilers. If you care about spoilers for Fear the Walking Dead, then just, forward ahead, like by a minute or two. But there is some imagery that suggests that Dwight and Sherry end up back at the sanctuary to check that out, and that seems kind of... I mean, I'm just looking at the map here, and logistically that feels inconceivable, but who am I to judge? I mean,
the
they
whole
made
show the last few years has been inconceivable. So they're just following what they do.
Yeah, so it's par for the course, really, is what it is. There is a tease that happens with Troy that I can't decide yet if they're going to follow up on the tease or if it's just there to piss people off. And either way, the whole thing will piss me off either way, because Troy has this bag with him and he makes some sort of threat to Madison about, because of what you did to me, I'm going to take away everything that's important to you. And he's like, everything. He reaches in his bag and he takes out, and it's the fake arm.
It's Alicia's arm.
Alicia was using. And
it's her actual arm, if you remember.
That's true. It was her actual bones, which was the weirdest friggin' thing I've ever seen on television. And so I guess the intimation is that he killed her. If
killed
he
her,
did,
he has her somewhere locked up in a basement.
Yeah, so
which we've all considered doing at one time or another.
Yeah. Wait, what did you just say about Alicia? You weirdo. You always gotta make it weird. And so I guess my point is that they're either teasing that Alicia, Debney, and Carrie will show up, and I hate them for that, or they're teasing you and she won't show up, and I hate them for that too. So they're really in a lose-lose situation as
you just hate them, basically.
The Alicia. So yeah, so that's the trailer. If you're at all interested, you can find it wherever bad trailers are shown worldwide. So enjoy yourselves, folks. I am already thinking about things to cover. We are, as of today, the 25th of September, which is Monday, they are dotting the I's and crossing the T's on a crossing my fingers, knocking some wood agreement with the writers.
Tentative.
So
they have a
it's
tentative agreement.
Very tentative, and it is not finalized. However, when Fear the Walking Dead is hooray, stick a fork in it, done, once we get past the holidays, we're going to want to cover some stuff. And when I was looking into the shows that we've covered for our little episode 300 retrospective there, we never covered Station 11, did we?
I thought we did.
I thought we did too. I don't see it in my notes anywhere.
No,
I'll have to look further.
Pretty sure we did, but okay.
I'll have to look further. I could have sworn we did too, but I don't see it in my well, either way. I was hoping to revisit the series, so if for some reason I had a brain fart and we never did cover it, I'd like to, or maybe revisit it somehow, because I'm about just a few pages away from finishing off the book, and I would love to have a conversation about comparing the book to the show, but if we've already covered the show, that's not absolutely necessary. There's lots of actual cool stuff. There's a new season of American Horror Story that's coming out that looks terrible, but nothing's as bad as Fear the Walking Dead.
It's got Kim Kardashian in it, so yeah.
Right. I reiterate, it looks terrible. But there's other really great series, like recent ones. Yellow Jackets is a great show. There is that new season of American Horror Story, but I've always been told that the very first season is their best, and I've never watched it all the way through, and that would be a fun thing to cover. There's the Creepshow series that Nicotero did. There's always, twisting Steve's arm and making him watch the pilot episode of Game of Thrones and see if we can pull him into that.
Are there dice?
In the first episode, no, I don't think so.
They can't be a game if there isn't dice.
Well, maybe there's just word games because, Tyrion does do a lot of talking and word play in word games. No, that doesn't work for you?
No, must be dice. Must be dice.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we'll see. We're still banging around some ideas, but we still have 3 weeks left of Daryl Dixon, 6 weeks of Fear the Walking Dead. And
then the holidays.
And some holidays, so probably not until like the first of the year until we have to think about covering something new. But if we've thrown that out there with you guys before, if there's something you'd love to see us cover, something new, something old, pass it along. Let us know. We'd love to hear one way or the other what you want to hear next. I guess that's it. Anything else for us to cover before we wrap it up?
No, we've been talking forever. Let's wrap it up. I mean, it is the 300th and everything, and it should be supersized, but this is ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. And there's football to watch. I mean, let's be honest.
Sports ball.
I know. Lots of sports ball today, folks. 2 sports ball games. So that's going to wrap it up for this week. We look forward to chatting with you again for episode 301. But until then, as always, I'm Diana.
And I am Steve. Bonjour.
Don't forget to always aim for the head.
Because body shots, they just don't work. They really don't.
To send us an email, write us at aimfortheheadpodcast@gmail.com. And our Twitter handle is @AFTH Podcast. Pictures and video are always welcome at our Instagram account, Aim for the Head Podcast, all one word. But the best way to keep in touch with us is to just like our Facebook page to get all of our updates in your feed.
Yes, this takes too long. Okay.
They are losing interest, the audience.
Yeah, they probably are.